Locker Room, with all the sports news you need, live.
Hello and welcome to the Locker Room. Yes, I am Michael and I am back. Thanks to Mr. Duffy for holding the jackets, as it were, for 2 weeks since I wasn't here. I was doing other things, other work commitments. But anyway, I'm back now, so I hope you're happy with your Christmas present. But sorry about that if you're not happy with me. But so this is the Locker Room till 7 o'clock on Indie Live Radio and Independence Live. If you want to make a comment on anything, and please go away, Michael, because it's a season of goodwill and all that kind of thing. Well, somebody told me that anyway. But here until 7 o'clock, make a comment on Facebook and Twitter, Facebook Live and YouTube, as well. And you can follow us on Twitter as well. You can follow us by going to the Locker Room Indie on Twitter as well. Good evening to FTB. Good evening, Graham and Michael. So there you go. So that's a nice welcome back to the show. Hopefully joined by our pal and colleague of the Times, the football, Scottish football correspondent, right on cue as I say that. It's Michael Grant. Hi, Michael.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Yeah. Thanks for being here. So we're just going to kick off because I can't believe this. We're a week today we'll be on, Graham, speaking about the Rangers game that the previous night and building up to the big game at the weekends as well. So it'll be brilliant to get some football back.
Absolutely, I cannot wait. Hello to Conrad Penman, who's also joined us, and I do know that FTB is Feed the Bear. He's one of our regular contributors, so it's good to see all these guys coming back on. And I have to say, Michael McEwen, I am so glad you're back, because trying to do prep for this show the last few weeks has been an absolute nightmare.
Well, at least somebody loves me, Graham. More than I can say in this house, but there you go. So Michael, how have you been? We've not saw you for ages. I know you've been busy, but I take it's been a bit of a quiet spell because of the World Cup's been on, so you haven't had any games to cover.
Yeah, it's been difficult because obviously the newspaper still needs to content to fill the pages. We've been producing a World Cup pullout every single day, which means that all the World Cup stuff goes into that, and you still need to have other stuff for the newspaper sports section itself. But obviously the change of manager at Rangers kept us going for a few days. But this week's been pretty tough. It's been pretty hard to find content, really, to be honest. But we'll get there,
Talking about the Rangers manager, that was a seamless link, Michael, because we're going to talk about that. Obviously, Michael Beale is a new appointment, and what was he appointed about 3 weeks ago now? And I've not been on. And obviously, this week, the Rangers AGM was on Tuesday, Michael. I don't know if you saw bits of it, or I don't know if you were actually at the Armadillo in Glasgow where they had the AGM. I was watching bits of it on YouTube, and I really got a sense of the atmosphere. It was a kind of mixed atmosphere in terms of the fans as well. So we'll move on to Michael Beale in a minute. But what was your take on the AGM, Michael?
Well, I think that the tone of it was probably softened or diluted a little bit by the change of manager, because I think there would have been a lot more kind of anger and unrest if the board hadn't seemed to be doing something. So whether the fans are all entirely on side with Michael Beale or not, I think the change of manager does kind of reset the temperature a little bit around the club. But there are a lot of other things going around at Rangers, a lot of other issues. Some of which were asked from the floor, from the shareholders. But to be honest, I never find an AGM, a club AGM, as dramatic or as tense or as stormy as we sometimes preview them as being. And I think that's partly because the format doesn't lend itself to a lot of controversy, really. You know, I mean, a few fans get selected to ask questions, but there's no follow-up questions to it, you know. So the board, or I'm not talking specifically about Rangers here, it applies to most clubs. I think it's a fairly tame exercise in AGM, you know, especially when, if there's not an outright mutiny against a board of directors, then it tends to go off relatively undramatically. And, you know, I think that those that had complaints and gripes about the Rangers board going into it come away with the same gripes and complaints. I don't think they really get the answers that they were looking for in this kind of format.
I thought it was interesting how one of the fans were asking, sorry, forgive me, the director of football, the name escapes me at the moment.
Ross Wilson.
Ross Wilson, yeah, sorry. He answered a question for one of the fans because Rangers were very close to signing a Dutch player, and I thought that was a bit of a weird kind of, because he left that kind of answer kind of like hanging, if you know what I mean, and they didn't really answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ross Wilson did get a bit of heat, to be honest with you. There was a question, I think, about whether the board was happy or satisfied with Ross Wilson's contribution at the club. So that was, you know, that was quite a kind of pointed thing for him to have to deal with, and of course he gave his own answer or his defence of his record. Now, funnily enough, we actually spoke to Ross Wilson after Michael Beale's announcement last Friday. Ross Wilson spoke to some of the daily newspapers after that, and we asked him that question. You know, that the record on the recruitment has been criticised, and did he think it was good enough? And he defended himself and said, "Yes, I do. I stand by the signings we've made." He thinks a lot of them have been good. A lot of them will come good. Now, you know, we can all argue that or dispute that, but that's his view. And it does seem to be that the Rangers board are satisfied with Ross Wilson's work. I think Stuart Robertson, the managing director, called it outstanding. I think, was it his inputs that's coming to the club, and he also talked up the kind of unseen work that Ross Wilson has done behind the scenes at the club. Now, you know, it's difficult for any of us to quantify that or judge how successful or otherwise that is, but certainly all the kind of tone that you hear from Rangers themselves is that they're very happy with Ross Wilson. But I think that kind of role, that sporting director of football role, if you're involved in recruitment, then you're going to be judged by and large on the success or otherwise of signings. And I think that's been pretty patchy in the last few transfer windows, to put it mildly.
Graham, when I was watching the Rangers AGM, I was like, oh no, you know, I didn't know what to expect, just because of Broncos get the sack and Michael Beale come in and they lost the league and they're 9 points behind as well. But as Michael was saying, that the AGM was quite kind of tame.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen more controversy in a Big Brother episode than I've seen at that AGM, to be honest. It was very dull. These things tend to be. I mean, I wrote a few kind of bullet points down. Now, I know that he was asked as well, you know, you mentioned about the Dutch players, and he did say that one agreed to join another club, despite agreeing terms with Rangers. Obviously, I don't know who that is because it didn't say. So that's probably disappointing. But the other thing I took down as well was the fact that he was also asked, I think I wrote it down here, one of the questions was, why did you sanction a move for John Souttar with that injury record? And the answer basically was, we went in with open eyes and believe he will contribute. Now, obviously, as an Arts fan, John Souttar is a very, very good player, but that's always been a bit of a downfall, is the fact that he is injured quite a lot. I think it's a good signing for Rangers if he's fit, but I can understand why that question was asked, because you're signing a guy that has a very poor injury record. Now, you've got him injured, you've got, I think, who is it, Kemar Roof, you've got Hadji, you've got Lawrence, you've got Davis as well. They've got a lot of injuries. And I think, I mean, I don't know what I expected for the AGM, but it wasn't as kind of, I wouldn't say exciting, but it certainly was as dull as I've seen quite a few before.
Michael, and the fallout continues between the Rangers board in 1972, you would say, as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of tension between Club 1872, the fans group, and they're kind of aligned with Dave King, or he's aligned with them, and Dave King has got real kind of personal issues with Douglas Park, the chairman, and would wish that he was out of the club. Dave King himself has still got a big shareholding that he's trying to offload. The Club 1872, I think, would like to take on that shareholding, but it's too expensive. You know, it's millions of pounds. So yeah, listen, I think Club 1872 and Dave King will continue to be thorns in the side of Douglas Park and the Rangers board in general until there's some resolution to this. Now, whether there's enough of a will on both sides to sit around the table and come to some sort of agreement or understanding about things, I'm not sure. But certainly the Club 1872 and Dave King, the board, need them like a hole in the head, frankly, because they are very public and vociferous critics of the way the Rangers are being run.
Yeah, and just for clarity, that Douglas Park has been voted back in as as the chairman of Rangers, 73.4% of the vote precisely. There you go. I like to be polite on these things. Don't need Carol Vogelman here for that one. I think she's too busy doing other things at the moment. So yeah, and also there was questions there at the AGM about somebody was asking questions about merchandise in the shop and the club shop, and some of the fans aren't very happy in terms of the merchandise as well, and also what was it? The other thing I picked up was the disabled parking outside Ibrox as well.
I think that's something that they are looking into, isn't it? They're looking at creating a new area or new spaces for the disabled section. And on the merchandising and on the ticket prices for the Champions League package, which I think were between £150 and £180 for a 3-game package, it's a lot of money, and I think there is a feeling amongst the Rangers support that they get milked pretty heavily by this board. There's a kind of endless stream of tops and merchandise coming into the club shops, constantly being marketed. They're constantly getting emails about this stuff, and we all know there's a cost of living crisis going on at the moment, and people don't have endless amounts of disposable income to spend on a club, however much they love it. So I don't know if Rangers get the balance right on that, to be honest. I think they look a little bit too like they're too keen to kind of milk the fans for money, because they've got so many loyal fans who will buy this stuff, they just want to have it. So there is a market for it, but I think I think they go a little bit too far in how much they churn out.
And I suppose, Glenn, that Rangers had to do something before the AGM, because as Michael alluded to there, if Rangers went into the AGM with Van Bronckhorst, I think the AGM wouldn't be as tame as we, I think it would be a bit heated. So I think that the Rangers board had to do something going into that AGM.
Yeah, they did. But I think one of the things that always kind of baffles me is the fact that why does Michael Beale have this great reputation when he's done very little so far in management? He only took over at QPR in June, and his run wasn't particularly great. I mean, I would be asking the question, why were QPR so happy for him to talk to Rangers? Now, he seems to be, people talk about the fact he was the brains behind the operation with Steven Gerrard. I don't know if that's true, results will tell. But I just think, why is this guy so highly rated when he's not done anything in management so far? You could be a great coach, doesn't mean you're a great manager. Look at Ian Cathro when he came to Hearts. He was a very well-respected coach, but he came to Hearts, did it on his own, and it failed. So I just don't know why he's getting such a big reputation. But one of the other things that I took as well from that AGM, and again, I wrote it down because I want to be right here. In the years since July 2018, Rangers have spent $60.2 million on player transfers, which is mental. And also, they've banked $17.6 million for the group stages of Champions League. Well, Liverpool earned $50.6 million. And Kenny Barclay said, and I quote, "It was far from a level playing field." How do you think Hearts fans, Hibs fans, Aberdeen fans feel every time we play Rangers and Celtic, it's a far from level playing field. I just found that quite an interesting comment to say that it's not a level playing field in the Champions League. Of course it's not. You're playing against better teams. But to say that it's not a level playing field when you're playing Scottish football and you've got other teams that feel exactly the same way, I just found that comment a little bit interesting, I would say.
I agree with you, Graham. I mean, I think I saw a line, and forgive me, I'm not entirely clear whether it came from the AGM or not, but there was a comparison made between what Rangers earn in a year and what Norwich earn in a year. And, that, this was being flagged up as like, look at the difference in the domestic market. Now, Norwich and Rangers aren't in the same domestic market. Rangers aren't competing with Norwich City. They're competing with, as Graham says, they're competing with Aberdeen and Hearts and Hibs and the rest. Now, apart from Celtic, who have got superior resources to them, not dramatically superior in terms of money in the bank, but superior money to them. But everybody else is on about a fifth. I think Hearts' latest turnover was something like 13 million. Is that right? 13, 14 million?
Yeah.
Aberdeen's is about the same. And then the Old Firm is something like 88 and 83 or something like that. So they can, both clubs can whinge all they like about the discrepancy in Europe, but they benefit from it week in, week out in Scottish football. So if there's one thing the last 20 years has taught us about football, is that the successful clubs are the ones with the money. It's not necessarily the transfer fees that you spend. It's more directly related to your wage bill. That's the most telling indicator of success in football across the planet. The bigger your wage bill is, the more likely you are to be a successful football club. It's not transfer fees, because you can get those spectacularly wrong, and 1 year you'll be good and 1 year you won't. So I agree with and the point about Michael Beale. Yeah, I mean, listen, if this goes wrong, we would look at this and go, did Rangers kind of lose a sense of perspective about Michael Beale when they went from did they convince themselves that this guy was the answer and the only answer? I mean, I think he's got his work cut out when you think that Van Bronckhorst, who was a popular former player, a very popular former Rangers player with a track record in management, and he got them to a European final, and he won the Scottish Cup, and he still didn't. Well, he lasted pretty much exactly 12 months. That's how long he got, and then the tide had turned against him so dramatically that he couldn't survive. Now, to get to a European final, okay, you didn't win it, but they did win the Scottish Cup. You think that just shows you how demanding this job is going to be. Now, Michael Beale can't take them to a European final because they're already out of Europe. Doesn't look to me like they're going to win the league. They're up against a very, very strong Celtic who don't look in any prospect of weakening anytime soon, unless Ange Postecoglou gets lured away, which you couldn't rule that out, by the way. But as long as he remains, I think Beale's got a hell of a job in his hands to turn that around. Because Celtic have got a youngish squad. All the kind of key players are at a good age. They don't seem to be unsettled or restless to get away. And as I say, they're 9 points ahead in the league. They're about to play an Old Firm game at the beginning of January, albeit at Ibrox. Beale could be under pressure pretty quickly. And the general point about him is that he's an inexperienced manager, and that stuff is what's going to bubble up to the surface if he starts poorly. People will be saying, "Oh, well, this guy, he's a rookie manager and all that," because 22 games at QPR. Now, listen, every manager has to start somewhere. Every manager gets his first job, and some of them succeed. But the ones that have had first-time success at Rangers, there were other factors that worked in their favour. Souness had more money than anybody else when he took over. Walter Smith inherited a fantastic side, a dominant side, when he took over first time around. Gerrard was given time because he was Steven Gerrard. That's how he got through 2 seasons without winning anything. It's because he was Steven Gerrard. They didn't want to sack him. He brought a lot to the club without winning trophies. Michael Beale doesn't really have any of that. He doesn't have any financial advantages over Celtic. He isn't inheriting a dominant winning team, and he isn't a big name. So he is going to have to hit the ground running, and he's got to at least make them competitive in the remaining months of the season, probably win a cup. I'm not saying to keep his job, but to just keep people cool about him, because otherwise they will overheat pretty quickly about about seeing Celtic pull further away if that's what happens.
I think one of the other comments that I found interesting as well, because again I wrote this down as well, a bullet point. See, I'm very prepared for the show, and it was the fact
You've done
that
your homework.
I have. It makes a change. But one of the questions again was, or one of the things that was said was, they only had one offer each for Morelos and Ryan Kent, which I found a bit interesting because for a while we were told that Morelos and Kent were Rangers' two of their best players, and they've only had one offer for both. Now, I think Morelos for me has looked disinterested recently. And I think the game against St Mirren when he played, I thought he was awful. And again, I think Ryan Kent, is a very good player on his day. But I think this season in particular, he's not had his day often enough. So again, the big question for me is, how does Michael Beale turn around Morelos and Ryan Kent?
Yeah, I agree with you on both. I mean, I think, listen, when you've had a player who's been good for you, like Morelos was for a while, for quite a long while. I mean, he's got the European scoring record. He's been there 4 or 5 seasons. He's been a consistently high scorer until this year. And it's tempting to always remember the great Alfredo Morelos, isn't it? It's tempting to think of him at his best and to think what he can bring, and to kind of airbrush the last few months and go, oh, well, that's him out of sorts. He can be better than that. I don't know. I mean, at what point do you take a decision that you can do better with your money? Because if you have to offer new terms to Morelos to keep him, he's not going to be cheap. He's going to ask for good high wages. And I think Rangers have a serious decision to make about whether to cut their losses and let him go, and think that they believe that they can sign again as well as. Now, he's been a brilliant signing for £1 million, the amount of goals he's brought them, but not this year. Not really since he's come back from the injury that cost him the end of last season. He came back out of shape. Van Bronckhorst dropped him from the squad for the PSV Eindhoven away game. Arguably their biggest game of the season it was at that point their biggest game of the season. He was out of shape. He still doesn't look in shape. He doesn't look fit. He hasn't really looked interested, let's be honest. And you think, well, is all that going to change under Michael Beale? It's not Steven Gerrard that's coming back. It's Michael Beale that's coming back. So, I think there's a tendency to keep players and to offer new contracts to players when it can almost be harder to say, right, let's be ruthless here and let's look at this and think, we can do better than this guy. Because if he's not playing now, and he's not looking in shape and not looking professional now, when he's in the remaining months of his contract and he's presumably trying to make himself as attractive as possible in the market, then what's his motivation next season? If they give him another 3 or 4 year contract on good wages, what's his motivation? He's got the money coming in the bank. Now, maybe Michael Beale believes he can get a tune out of him again like they did first time around. Maybe he will. But I think it's a decision they have to take.
Obviously, I mean, Michael Beale's not going to be judged straight away, but looking at the fixtures after the World Cup, in the first 5 games, he has Hibs, Aberdeen, and he's got Celtic to come. I mean, they are going to be very difficult games. And, I mean, as I say, he's not going to be judged straight away, but those become very difficult games straight away. And if you lose 1 or 2 of them, then a lot of Rangers fans might start saying, do you know what, this might not be the right appointment after all.
Is that the Aberdeen game away, Graham, or is that game at Ibrox? Because I know that they've still got to play Aberdeen away, but I think that was a game in hand.
It's that Pittodrie, and they've also got them in the cup as well.
That's right.
All right, okay. So a few kind of difficult games coming up. The 18th manager, Graham. It's quite hard to believe that. That Rangers has appointed the 18th manager, but it's not like me, Graham, to say something controversial on the show. But hey, this is my first week back after 2 weeks, so I'm definitely going to say it now. Do you think that they went for Michael Beale as the Rangers manager, Michael, as the cheap option? I know that might be controversial there.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it did cost him about $1.5 million to get him and his management team out of QPR. So you could argue
Yeah.
a cheaper option would have been to look into the Scottish Premier League or the Premiership, should I say, for a manager. I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest. I thought from the very beginning of, as soon as they sacked Van Bronckhorst, I thought my hunch was that the new guy would be somebody who Ross Wilson had worked with before, because Ross Wilson is a big influence in that club. You know, he's a big factor. You know, I think he is the kind of conduit and the contact to clubs in Europe and in England as far as Rangers are concerned, rather than anybody on the board. So it was almost going to be, I think, somebody that he had worked with, and obviously he worked with Beale before. Now, you know, you could say, is that really casting the net very wide? You know, I mean, there are managers all around Britain, all around Europe, all around the world. Is the extent of the search just to go for the guy who left a year ago and has never really managed before? But then again, he knows the club. He's clearly passionate about the club. He's popular with the players. I'm led to believe that they were happy to see him coming back. He's popular around the club. Now, that only gets you so far, but I suppose it was a factor in him coming. And then, after the AGM, we need to see how much money he's going to get in January, because between January and the summer, it's 2 big windows. They've got a lot of players coming out of contract, not just Kent and Morelos, but Davis and Jack and McGregor and Arfield and Tillman and Sands, the 2 boys that are on loan. They've got a decision to make on whether to try and make bids for them and get them to come. And there's not that many sellable assets. Glenn Kamara, there's talk about him getting moved on today for a few million. Not sure, I mean, he's not been starting regularly recently, so is there going to be a queue of clubs for him? I think there's interest in France, but not sure what the fee would be. So he's got to restructure their squad, because it's also not a particularly young squad. They've got a lot of players. They've got about 6 regular starters in their 30s. Arfield's 34, Davis is 37, McGregor's 40, John McLaughlin, the backup keeper's 35, Tavernier is 31, I think. So none of these guys are getting any younger. And when you compare them with Celtic, and domestically that is who they have to be judged against, there's far more energy and movement and speed in that Celtic side than there is in the Rangers one, and it's shown in a lot of the recent derbies, especially the 2 at Parkhead that they won 3 and 4-0 this year. And those 2 results were very, very significant in pushing Van Bronckhorst out of the club, because the fans don't take that. They don't take getting hammered by Celtic. And it will happen again unless the team gets some energy and pace into it, especially into the midfield.
And Celtic have strengthened again as well, sending Alistair Johnson, and they got the other Japanese boy a couple weeks ago as well, so they're strengthening.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And I was just going to say, Michael Beale doesn't have long to wait. Graham, Thursday night, Hibs at Ibrox, a very difficult game, but I think the advantage that Michael Beale has got, it's a home game as well. But if anything goes wrong on that game, you'll have 50,000 down your throat on your first night in the office.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned a little while ago that Rangers have got their 18th manager under Romanoff. Hearts had 18 managers about 2 weeks. That's not unusual. But I mean, I think, to be honest, they're probably playing the right team, because Hibs have not had a great run at the moment. They've obviously lost Martin Boyle for the rest of the season, which is a huge blow. They're going to get Kevin Nisbet back, which is, he's a very good player. Aidan McGeady, I completely forgot about him, but he played in a friendly against Wraith Rovers a couple of days ago. So I think Hibs might be the right team to play, because Hibs are not doing particularly well just now. But, if things go wrong here, let's say Hibs take the lead, it's going to be interesting to see how the Ibrox crowd reacts. But if Rangers get an early goal in that game, then I think they'll probably win the game quite comfortably. But, you are coming back after a break. There could be a bit of rustiness. It's going to be difficult. So it's going to be interesting to see what Michael Beale does. He spoke about the fact that he wants his team to play with the energy and tempo, which sounds great on the training ground, but it's putting into actual game time. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does. But as I say, they've got a lot of difficult games coming up, including that Celtic Rangers game. That's going to be huge.
It doesn't take much for Rangers or Celtic to get a bit of momentum going. I mean, if he does win his first game, and then I'm trying to think what the second one is. As you say, he's at Pittodrie. I think the second game is Pittodrie, isn't it? They're home to Hibs, they're away at Aberdeen.
Christmas Eve. Yeah.
Aye. I mean, if he gets a couple of good results there, and then they'll have another couple of home games. It's not difficult for the old firm clubs to get a bit of momentum going. It's the kind of new manager bounce and all that sort of thing. And it might happen. I think the big thing about Rangers recently, or one big thing about them, is that they just looked so lacking in confidence. They've just looked so flat. And I think that's because of all the hidings they took in the Champions League. Now, a new manager can change that. Change it almost instantly because it's a reset button. Players will like him, perhaps, that didn't like Van Bronckhorst. They can respond to him in a way they didn't respond to Van Bronckhorst, all that kind of stuff. So it's possible. It's possible that they'll get a lift. But I do think that they won't get the better of Celtic over the remaining league games, over the 3 games. I don't think they'll get more points than Celtic will. And therefore, I don't think the gap will particularly narrow. I don't see Celtic dropping that many points, or certainly not more than Rangers in the remaining games. So it'll be difficult for them to get a foothold and to close the gap. To go back to Gerrard, the thing that Gerrard was able to do in his first 2 seasons was really improve them in Europe. And that bought him a lot of time, and it bought him credibility, and it made people think there is a manager here. Because domestically, it didn't really happen. They had a lot of cup defeats. Didn't really make much of an impact in the cups, frankly. And obviously, Celtic kept winning the league. But Europe, they began to look serious, and he looked impressive in that. And Bale doesn't have that for the first 6 months of his Rangers career. He might come in next season, he might look impressive in Europe next season, but right now that feels a long way away, and his responsibility right now for himself is to dig in and get a foothold in it and make it look like he can handle the job and handle the challenge of trying to live with Celtic.
See, just actually touching on Celtic as well. I mean, I've said for weeks now that Celtic win the league comfortably. I think they've got far too much quality. But one of the things is as well, there's been a lot of talk about Josef Juranovic maybe on the move. He's been outstanding today against Brazil for Croatia, and he's probably one of the players of the tournament. I mean, if you're Celtic, how much would you be looking to get if you're going to sell Juranovic? How much are you looking at? Because again, I think after today, he's just put more millions on that price tag.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Atletico Madrid, isn't it, that's been quoted with an interest in him. They would not have any problem going over 10 million, or whatever they think he is realistically worth. I mean, he's under contract for quite a long time, but I think there's not much. I don't think there's much doubt that he's going to be moving on soon, because I think they've not been able to come to an agreement on a new deal with better terms. The Alistair Johnson signing looks like a replacement to me. So I would suggest that Celtic will be delighted by his performance today against Brazil and in the tournament in general, because he has shown himself to be a pretty classy defender.
I think as well, if you were a Celtic fan, you would be hoping that the World Cup would come in the summer, because it came at a bad time, okay, for every club, but especially Celtic, because you think of Maiga with Japan as well. He's had a good kind of like World Cup as well. I wanted to just go back on Rangers point a minute, and I know I was saying to you earlier on, Graham, about the AGM, and if it the Rangers board had to do something like appoint a new manager, as in Michael Beale. But if you look at it this way, right, if Rangers didn't have an AGM, would Van Bronckhorst still be there? Oh, Graham's on mute.
You know what? It's because my daughter was talking to me, so I was trying to do 2 things at once, and as a man, I can't do that. No, I think he would have been gone. I think there was too much negativity in the club, and I think that result against St Mirren before the World Cup was so disappointing. I think they had to do something, and I think we said that, or certainly I did anyway, that I expected him to go. I expected him to go during the World Cup, and he left before it even started, so that wasn't a surprise. I think it had to happen. In a way, I felt sorry for it because I thought he had credit in the bank because of European run. But that Champions League campaign was just an absolute disaster. I mean, yes, it was a difficult group, but losing 7-1 to Liverpool at home was an embarrassment. Liverpool are a very good side, but they weren't great at that time. And to concede 6 goals in that second half was a huge blow. And a lot of Rangers fans wanted Van Bronckhorst gone after that. So it wasn't a surprise. But again, I mentioned this to Dave last week as well. Now, I might be kind of contradicting myself here when I say that, you know, Michael Beale might work, he might not. But I heard a pundit last week, and I'm not going to name him, saying that it was a bit of a worry that Rangers only ever had one candidate. Now, in a way, I kind of applaud that in a way because I think, well, you've identified the target that you wanted and you brought him in. But then on the other hand of that, if it doesn't work and you've only ever had one target, then it's going to be a massive letdown.
Yeah. Yep. If you think back a year ago, Van Bronckhorst was the outstanding candidate. You know, he was the one that ticked all the boxes. The fans wanted him in. This time, I'm not sure there was an outstanding candidate, and there wasn't one that I think all the fans wanted. I think I would say that Beale has had a kind of warmish response from the Celtic supporters, Rangers supporters.
You've kind of got upset half of Glasgow, Michael, and you.
Yeah, well, maybe actually, I think a lot of Celtic fans are quite happy with him getting the job as well. And let's see if they're right or they're wrong, you know. But so I don't think that you know. I wrote about it last week, but I mean, when Gerrard was appointed, there was 7,000 gathered at Ibrox to see him because it was a big deal. It was, you know, the fans were right up for the idea of Steven Gerrard. Now, Michael Beale, they're okay. They like Michael Beale, but I think there has been a kind of cooling about him when it became real that he was going to be the manager. And I think some of them have been a little bit jittery about it, and they're not sure about it. But, you know, they'll give him their support, but it might be fairly short in terms of patience. But listen, we're all here assuming that it'll start badly. It might not. They might start well. But this Old Firm game on January the 2nd is going to rush at him. It'll feel like it's on him in 5 minutes.
And I suppose
I was just going to say Croatia against Brazil's gone to penalties.
Oh, right, okay. What was the final score, Graham? Was it 1 each?
1-1.
1-1, yeah. And I suppose, like, I know there's big comparisons here, Michael, but I suppose, like, the appointment of Michael Beale was, like, the appointment of Postecoglou, and where I'm coming from that is nobody heard of Postecoglou before because, obviously, it came from million miles away, and some journalists thought, you know, he didn't hear of what was missing and all that. But I find that hard to believe. But anyway, but the comparison here is that look at Postecoglou. I mean, he came in the first season, he won the league. He might win 2 in a row this season. You never know. You know, so we might be sitting here at the end of the season, surprised with Michael Beale's progress in terms of winning games or winning the cup.
Oh, listen, absolutely. I mean, if there's one thing that you learn over a few years of covering the scene, that you know, don't rule out anything. You know, don't assume that one dominant manager is going to remain dominant. You know, I remember Alec McLeish coming in to take on Martin O'Neill, and I didn't think he would be able to live with O'Neill, but he did. He won a treble, and he won his fair share of trophies at Rangers. You know, against a really dominant Celtic that was you know, going to Seville and all the rest of it. So there are times where one team looks really far ahead and it's turned. I mean, we saw it with Postecoglou. You know, I mean, Postecoglou had a proper track record as a manager, but people here were a bit sniffy about it. I wouldn't say too badly, but you know, there was a bit of sniffiness that was this guy who most people hadn't heard of. If you looked at his record, you thought, yeah, that's a pretty decent record. You know, took Australia to a World Cup and won the league in Japan and Australia, but people were saying, well, can he handle a move to Europe? As it turns out, he could handle it, and he also signed brilliantly. His record in the transfer market was astonishing in that first season. And I think that's really been the bedrock of his success at Celtic. Now, Beale might have that impact. Beale might sign really well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players, each of them having a big impact, and suddenly Rangers are transformed. But that's a big if. He's got to do all that between him and Ross Wilson, and the club making money available. That's what they now have to do, because the current squad isn't good enough. I know he said that it's not as broken as people make out, but the current squad is not good enough. It's too old. It's not quick enough. There isn't a future in that Rangers squad, so it needs a rebuild.
But you know yourself, Michael, he wasn't going to say that at the AGM in front of all the fans. Deep down, he might think it, but he can't say it because he would get dogged abuse for coming out with a statement like that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, it's all about playing, talking relatively conservatively and not... You've also got to rely on players until you move them. You can't just come out and say, well, my squad's rubbish. Because, that's not going to motivate any of them. It's all it's going to do is demoralise them even further. So, you've got to be cagey about that. Comes down to man management. I think Beale's pretty clever. I get the feeling he's a pretty sharp guy. And he's been around football and he's been around dressing rooms long enough to know, I think, let's see, but I think he's been around long enough to know what to say and what not to say. But it's him. He's now the guy in front of the mics, in front of the cameras. And, he'll have to show whether he can judge that properly and just handle that side of things, because it's very different from just being a training ground coach, which he's clearly pretty talented at. But there's a whole other world of responsibilities that come with being the manager.
And I suppose, Graham, looking at the other side of the city, if you were a Celtic fan at the moment, you would be licking your lips because you might have the full squad of Japan over in the East End of Glasgow.
Yeah, I mean, Michael's just touched on it. Postecoglou's transfer record has been incredible. I mean, you can sign as many players as you want, but you might get one or two that don't work. To be fair, most of his signings have worked very well, and he's brought another 2 in. Postecoglou's track record has been fantastic. And I just think that Celtic are going to go from strength to strength. I'd imagine that come January, they'll probably look to strengthen even further. I know that there's a lot of talk about Giakoumakis potentially going, which I think would be a bit of a disappointment because I think he's done well for Celtic when he's played. But, you've got, I think for me, the disappointing thing is that Hatate and Kyogo weren't at the World Cup, but then Japan did well without them anyway. But I just think Celtic have got such a strong squad, and they're only going to get better. And that's the worry for Rangers, I think, would be that Celtic are only going to get stronger. I can see Postecoglou being here for quite a while and dominating Scottish football for quite a long time. Nobody can get near them. Now, I know they lost to, I think it was St Mirren not that long ago, but just Celtic are such a strong side, and they still got Callum McGregor to come back as well. So they're just going to get stronger, and that's got to be a worry. And the signings are just so impressive.
Michael, but obviously we've got your company until 6 o'clock tonight, and if you want to comment on anything that we are talking about, because we do make sense sometimes. Well, Michael does, but I don't know about me, Mr. Duffy. You can comment on YouTube and Facebook Live as well. And don't forget, Graham, because the football's back next weekend, we are back next Sunday as well.
Which just sounds weird because the World Cup finals next Sunday. That just doesn't sound right.
Exactly, yeah. So talking about the World Cup, Michael, and I've not been on for a few weeks. What have you made of the World Cup so far? It's still kind of weird watching the World Cup when you're Christmas shopping.
It has been weird. I think it was interesting because you had a week really when there was a lot of focus on the issues around the tournament. The kind of the treatment of the migrant workers and the treatment of homosexuality in Qatar. And other kind of human rights abuses, and there was a really heavy focus on that for a week leading up to the opening games. But I think once the game started, because it's so fast and furious, it's been relentless up until the last couple of days when you've had a break. It's been about football, and I've read a couple of pieces actually talking about how every World Cup really looks the same now. It does. I mean, every stadium, all these new stadiums, they all look the same. The TV production is all that looks the same. And it also seems like, to be fair to them, although God knows what it's done for the climate and the carbon footprint, but it does seem like the air conditioning stadiums have been successful in what they were set out to do, because I don't really recall seeing any or hearing any complaints about the temperatures for the players. Doesn't seem to be a factor. In fact, if anything, I think there's suggestions that it's really pretty, almost chilly at pitch level, for some of them. So that's been good. So it hasn't been a factor that spoilt the tournament in that sense. I think it's been a bit of a mixed bag, like a lot of World Cups are, in terms of some games have been pretty stinking, others have been entertaining. There's one currently right ongoing at the moment, Michael, that Croatia are ahead of Brazil in penalties. So we might get one of the stories of the tournament in the next couple of minutes here. And to an extent, I think World Cup is always kind of defined by how it ends and who wins it, and whether it's a good final and all that sort of stuff. So it's taken shape to be okay in a football sense. I've got my views about it being in Qatar. I think it's a really unacceptable and just a really, really poor decision by FIFA to take it there, and what we might speak about in a second or two is the fact that it's going to get bigger the next time, because they're expanding the tournament for 4 years' time.
Do you feel as though that, and I've kind of wrote about this as well, but do you feel as though that when we call it the beautiful game of football, the beautiful part has been took out of the football because it's all about money now?
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely. I mean that's why it's expanding. It's not expanding to make the tournament any better. It's expanding because it'll make it more lucrative. It'll bring in even more TV markets. It'll bring in.
Sorry, Michael. I was just going to say it's the same with the Champions League.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've gone up from 2 European club tournaments to 3 because there's so many clubs involved. We've seen the Nations League being created as a new European tournament. As you say, the Champions League's about to get bigger in terms of more group games. And now the European Championship has gotten bigger in the last 2 or 3 editions of it. And now you're going to see the World Cup going from, I think it's 64 games to 104 potentially. Now, to me, it's too big. That's way too big. An extra 16 teams coming in of questionable quality. None of them are going to go particularly far into the tournament. So I think you're at risk of spoiling something that's really at its best beautiful. And I've just seen Brazil get knocked out of the World Cup. So,
yeah.
So the architects of the beautiful game are not going to win it this time.
Yeah, let's hope it doesn't open up too much of England tomorrow night. And I can safely say it on the station. We can. It's on the radio station that we don't want England to do well on as well. Let's hope my colleagues isn't listening from the BBC or elsewhere. Graham, I don't know if you saw my petition or whatever on Twitter. I'm trying to get a new sport set up for the summer because we haven't got any World Cup this year.
No, I think the only thing more enjoyable about Neymar's cheers will hopefully be Harry Kane's cheers tomorrow when France pump them out the World Cup. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've not actually watched a lot of the World Cup. The 10 o'clock games and that, I'm usually working, so I don't see them. And the ones later on, I've just not really been that interested in them. There's been a few decent games, but I mean, Germany were so poor. Spain, I don't think they were particularly great either. A lot of the big nations will be very poor. Japan, I think, for me, one of the standout teams of the tournament. Australia,
yeah.
3 Hearts players in that. Only 2 of them played, and Cameron Devlin never got a game, but still got Lionel Messi's shirt. Go on, Devlin. I mean, it has been very strange having a World Cup in the winter, and it's just been. It must be strange for the teams as well, like every other team in Scotland and England and stuff as well, to have players away, then they come back and they go straight into another game. It is very bizarre. But I mean, the fact that they're extending the World Cup and Scotland probably still won't qualify will be a massive disappointment.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Graham. I mean, it doesn't particularly make it any more likely that we'll qualify because the number of places goes up by 16, but there's only 3 extra European places, you know? So it's not as if there's suddenly the door is open and everybody's going to be waved through. It's still going to be really, really difficult for Scotland to qualify for a World Cup. You know, and you've seen teams like Italy that haven't made it this time who, let's be honest, Italy will probably qualify next time, you know? So, excuse me. So, yeah, there have been great stories, as Graham said there. I think Denmark were a disappointment. Germany, Belgium, Uruguay, you would normally see getting into the knockout stages. Spain, I thought, were very impressive in their first game and then got steadily kind of less impressive. And then I thought their penalties were absolutely pitiful, to be honest with you. You know? Now you're seeing Brazil going out. Now, in the coming days, let's be honest, the shock would be France going out. It could easily happen. England could beat them. Argentina are playing tonight. You know, who knows where this tournament's going to go? But it does seem to be that the big sides are being skittled out. Now, listen, if it ends up France-Argentina, then I suppose that'll feel a little bit familiar, won't it, in terms of 2 really big heavyweights getting there. But, I mean, Morocco are still in there. Portugal are still in there. England are still in there. Teams that don't get to World Cup finals. So, you know, like Holland, for example. Well, Holland do get to finals, don't they? But so, yeah, I still think we need a bit more time to judge the tournament as a whole. But yeah, I think there's been some nice stories from some of the smaller or less fancied nations doing some good stuff. And I mean, the other thing about the Scottish representation or the SPFL representation, it's been quite lucrative for those clubs. I think they get something like $9,000 a day while their players are in the tournament. So, I mean, that adds up. If Hearts had 3 players in the Australia squad, you know, that adds up. Because I don't think they just take it from the opening game of the tournament. I think it's is it something like when the team arrives in the country or something like that? I mean, it's a good sort of period of staying there or duration of staying there that they get paid for. So, you know, there's benefits from that kind of thing too.
Michael, I was just going to say as well, I've wrote this in my piece as well, but like we always speak about when we speak about a World Cup championship, well, not so much championships, but World Cups and Olympic Games, we always speak about the legacy. And what I make the point that to say that there won't be any legacy after these games. That after this tournament will be remembered for like human rights issues and all that, you know, like stuff off the park, nothing to do with football.
I think that's probably right. I mean, it'll be interesting to read pieces in the coming, you know, in a year's time, for example, or 5 years' time, and let's see if the human rights issues are any better in Qatar as far as we're concerned. You know, I'm not convinced they will be. I mean, I think they've probably tried to put on an acceptable face to the West, essentially, in terms of saying, you know, we have improved the conditions for the workers, and you know, our attitude on homosexuality has softened over the years, but it still doesn't fit with Western values. Now, you know, okay, you respect other cultures, but you've also got to stick to your own principles about what you think is right and wrong. Now, there's no question that the migrant workers have been treated pretty disgracefully over the last 10, 15 years. You know, the working conditions are poor. The safety conditions are being pretty negligent. You know, 6,000 deaths. Now, that's not just in stadiums. We know that. They've made it pretty clear. But it's in the infrastructure of building a country that's building an infrastructure suitable for the World Cup. Motorways, monorail system, you know, airport improvements, 7 new stadiums, I think. It's an enormous undertaking to take on a World Cup. And by the way, the other thing about expanding the tournament is going to make it even harder for any host nation to do it, and it'll narrow the number of countries that can do it to really just the big ones. You know, I mean, Qatar's managed because it's essentially one city, isn't it? And I think the travelling support has been lower than it would normally be because a lot of fans haven't wanted to go to Qatar. But you know, once you get back into mainland Europe, fans want to go there in big numbers. and it's not going to get any easier for them.
Well, I was just going to say this to you, Graham. What Michael makes an excellent point, and we were talking about Scotland, and I'm not being a bit snobby here or whatever, but you think of like teams like Morocco qualifying for World Cup, we should be there. We should be at that part as well that we always speak about, and there's teams and wee nations, and I'm sorry if anybody's watching from Morocco, I'm sure they're not, but I need to cover myself when I say that. But you were saying that, why is Morocco there and we're not there, and we are a big nation and a big lover of football, and I guess it's a bit unfair at times.
Hindsight's great, but I genuinely believed to myself that had we been in that group with England, we'd got through, because I thought Wales and USA were
Poor.
Massive disappointments. I thought they were. I mean, USA did well against England, don't get me wrong, but I thought Wales were dreadful.
I thought Wales were pretty poor against England, Graham, as well.
They were awful. I thought Scotland could easily have got that group, but it's unfortunate. But that's just the way it is. Scotland we're used to not qualifying. We qualified for Euros through the back door for the Nations League. And I just think Scotland have got a very good side now. I do still think we're lacking up front, but I think through that team we've got a good side. And to watch all these other smaller nations being there, and we're sitting at home, although, to be fair, you can't drink in Qatar, so there's no point in Scotland fans being there anyway, because you can't have a drink, so there's no point. But I just think it would have been great if Scotland could have been there. But, we've got to hopefully get to the next one in 4 years' time. But it's just a letdown, because I'm watching Wales and thinking, honestly, they were awful. How did they get there? And, I mean, I think the thing for me is it's been great to see Scottish representation there. I mean, the fact that you've got Bacchus of St Mirren tackling Lionel Messi is just weird, but it was good to watch. And it's great that you've had a lot of Scottish representation there, but the fact that Scotland aren't there is such a letdown. And they must be disappointed in themselves as well that they're not there. I mean, Morocco, I don't think we're in any great shakes, to be honest. I do still think that probably the main two for me were Japan. I thought they were brilliant. And Australia put up a really good fight. France were very good in the second half, but Australia were very impressive. If they managed to go through, I'd have been delighted with that. The fact they even got to the knockout stage has been really impressive. But Scotland just have to get there next time, because see, watching a World Cup without Scotland, it's really frustrating.
Michael, we've only got a few minutes left with yourself tonight, but I wanted your take going from Gakar to millions of money to Scottish football. Maybe not millions of money, but embarrassing as well. The news came out yesterday about the SFA and VAR, me and Graham's favourite subject, would not be used in a lot of the Scottish Cup games in the new year, and teams like Dundee United, come out and Aberdeen could be forced to pay to use VAR during the Scottish Cup ties, but Celtic and Rangers won't have to pay. I don't know about you, Michael, but that's quite embarrassing again for Scottish football.
Aye, I mean, when you have a cup tournament, you really should have consistency of rules and conditions across it. Now, my team is going to be going to Darvel. Now, it's pretty obvious that Darvel aren't going to have the facilities for VAR. Now, then you have a decision to make on at home to, is it Morton, I think, in the cup?
Yeah.
So you think, well, if the facilities, if the facilities are there at Parkhead, do you use them or do you deliberately switch them off because you don't have them across every tie? I think the same thing happened in England. Did I read that the same thing happened in England? And Arsenal had a tie, one of the early ties in the FA Cup, and it applied to them, but not to every game. But yeah, listen, it's messy. I think you're always going to have an issue with the Scottish Cup, because not every club is going to have the facilities for it. VAR is a Premiership issue. It's paid for by the Premiership clubs. The equipment is paid for by the Premiership clubs. So there's no way that a small club, and I'm using Darvel as an extreme example because they're, what are they, 7th tier, I think, or 6th tier in Scotland. But, Championship teams, League One teams, if they get a windfall tie, they're not going to say, right, I'll put my hand up and pay whatever it is, 10 grand for a one-off VAR. It's just not going to happen. So I think you're always going to have this discrepancy in Scottish Cup ties about some ties having VAR and others not, unless you take a blanket decision that we just don't use it at all.
Graham?
I think it's an absolute shambles. I mean, can you imagine? This probably won't happen, for example, but say like Darvel were to get knocked out the cup because of a dodgy decision that doesn't have VAR. I think it's an embarrassment. But
I'll be perfectly happy with that, Graham.
I mean, I just think you have to have VAR for all of the games or none of them. You can't have it for some of them. And I think what I saw is as well that it's only going to be used for the games that are televised. So you're probably looking at Celtic, Morton, St Johnstone, Rangers, Hibs, Hearts, but then Darvel, Aberdeen probably won't be have VAR. So it's an absolute shambles, but it doesn't surprise me.
I've got a funny feeling the TV will want to cover that game, because the Darvel Aberdeen game, because I don't want to fall out with a fellow journalist here, but they might be going for an upset.
I think there is a suggestion that BBC will take that one. I mean, nothing's been confirmed yet, but it does have the look of the kind of tie that BBC would take. You know, it's a classic Scottish Cup tie, isn't it? A big team at a tiny ground, and yeah, it is an upset potential, and it's also just the kind of the oddity of it, isn't it? The novelty of it. One of the bigger clubs going to such a small ground.
And then before you go, Michael, we've had VAR, not very controversial in the World Cup, but you actually see the difference, like 5 seconds, and it's been made. Whereas the Scottish football, I mean, I remember watching the Aberdeen Hibs game in November. I think it was 9 minutes the Aggie going for that, and I still don't think it was a penalty. But 9 minutes they could cover that. Okay, there was injuries in the game as well, but that the majority of it went to VAR, and you're thinking, well, you know, compare that to the World Cup, and the rest make the decision in about 10 seconds or a couple of seconds. Back here, it takes about a few days to make a decision, and they still can't get it right.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, that's what they've said. They've talked about teething problems, and you know, if you're against VAR, then this is just one of the things that you'll think. You know, you just roll your eyes and go, "Well, told you." You know, this is what's spoiling it, or spoiling the game about VAR. I've been surprised at how intrusive the whole thing has felt. You know, I felt like I was used to VAR and I'd seen enough games on TV or been at enough European games with VAR to be kind of acclimatized to it. But I must admit, going to domestic games with it has been a bit of an eye opener. It's been more of a factor than I had really expected it to be, and I think that is, to some degree, it's down to the officials still having to get to terms with it and just be quicker. They just need to be quicker. I think there is an element of it being a new toy at the moment, so they're kind of, you know, they're using it more than they might necessarily do once they just settle down, and hopefully they do settle down. Hopefully it becomes less of an intrusion in the game and just a kind of a tool that we're going to have to get used to it because it's here to stay.
Okay, so thanks for joining us tonight, Michael. It's been a pleasure speaking to you as always, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Graham.
Cheers,
all
Michael.
the best, guys.
Cheers, Michael.
See you later.
Bye. Bye.
There we go. That was Michael Grant there from the Times, football correspondent from Scotland. Just on 6 o'clock, an hour left on the show. You know, when I come back to working on the show this week, Graham, I thought, what will we talk about? And there's a lot to still talk about, and obviously we had the AGM as well. So if you want to comment on anything that we're talking about, just go to Facebook Live or YouTube and you can comment. And also, please give us a wee follow on Twitter, because we like to people following us on Twitter at the Locker Room Indie on Twitter. And just a couple of programme notes. Next Friday will be back between 5 and 7. football's back. Yes, and a small matter of and a small matter of not a Christmas night out, but a World Cup night out next Sunday as well. And we'll preview the World Cup final when we're on that Sunday as well, between 3 and 5. See, I remember the time, Glenn. It's amazing. I've been away for a few weeks and these pills are working brilliantly. So, did you say that? Right, okay. So back to Scottish football, Graham. And I don't know if you saw this news today. Jeff Brown is to sell his shares in St Johnstone as chairman.
Yeah, I mean, he took over in 1986, so he's been there a long, long time. And obviously, he's overseen St Johnstone winning 2 cups in 2021. I think he's done a very good job at St Johnstone. I think I have to say I applaud him as well, because last season St Johnstone were very poor, and it would have been very easy for him to say, "Do you know what, Callum Davidson, time to go," but he didn't. He stuck with him, and it was the right decision, because I think they have been better this season. So I think his reign will be deemed as successful in terms of St Johnstone, because they're never going to win the league. Let's be honest. They've had ups and downs like every team has, but to win those 2 cups, I think, was fantastic. So it'll be a big loss to St Johnstone. He has been there for 36 years, so fantastic what he's done, and it'll be a big loss. And replacing him will be a difficult one. But I think, as I say, you have to give him credit for what he's done and what he's achieved at St Johnstone, because he's done a very good job there.
And don't forget, Graham, before St Johnstone fans friends something at the computer to you, they actually won the Scottish Cup back in 2014 as well.
Oh, yeah, so I forgot about that.
Yeah. But I thought this was a bit weird, right? So he's actually selling his control over the club, right? But he says, but he will return as chairman if the club hasn't got a buyer in June. I think that a bit hard to believe.
Doesn't sound very confident, does he?
No.
Does that mean nobody's going to watch St Johnstone? I'm sure there must be somebody who would take over St Johnstone and run it just as well as Jeff Brown's done. But I suppose at least he's put a plan in place that if that doesn't happen, then he will come back. So he's kind of covered both bases. But yeah, it is a bit bizarre thing to say. So hopefully somebody will buy St Johnstone. I've not got the money, I would do it. But there you go.
Quoting the St Johnstone website, and you can go onto the St Johnstone website because they've made a massive statement on there. But he says, as a lifelong St Johnstone fan, it's been an honour to be part of this great football club. And I mean, it's one of these ones where, am I being a bit unfair here, Graham, in saying that St Johnstone's one of the sleeping giants of Scottish football?
I think, they are a very good club. They've got a really fantastic stadium in Perth. I've been there a few times. It's a great stadium. They just don't have enough fans to fill it. Sorry, St Johnstone fans. But I mean, I keep going back to that European night they had. Look how full that stadium was. That's what you want every week, but they just can't seem to get it. But they're a very well-run club. They're a really respected club. Obviously, when they won the cup in 2014, didn't forget this time. It was great to see the people of Perth coming out and cheering the team on. So they just don't have that fan base, and that's got to. But I say that for a lot of teams, i.e. Livingston, they don't have a massive fan base either. If they could just get those fan bases better, then I think they'd be a lot better. But I mean, Sleeping Giant, I suppose they potentially are, but they are a very good club. They're a very well-run club. They're a family club. And I think, as I say, for Jeff Brown to step down after all this time, he's done a fantastic job there. Hopefully somebody else will come in and take it over before June, or he'll have to come back.
I will be back. Maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger's going to buy them over. I don't know. But it's a nice gig in McDermott Park.
I love going there. It's a really good stadium. I've not been there for a while, but I used to go there quite a lot in the 90s and stuff, and it's a cracking little stadium. And, it's not difficult to get to. It's a really, really nice ground. So, yeah, I quite like going there. I want to go back again, actually. It's one of my favourite away grounds.
Yeah, no, exactly. And nice pies as well. And a bit of culture in Perth. So, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, it'll be I was actually was I quite surprised when I saw that news? No, I wasn't, because obviously he's been there for 11 years, and it's a long time. And I think the only family run club next to St Johnson, am I right? Dundee United with the late great Eggy Thompson there, with the Thompson family. Is that right?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, you could be right there.
Yeah. So there you go. So I think he's actually stepping down at as of the now. But we'll see what happens. But you never know. We could be speaking about him. I knew St Johnson chairman coming back in June, and that could be Jeff Brown. Okay, so it's quite a historical weekend. Not because I'm making the comeback on the show for 2 weeks, but it's a big weekend for women's football, Graham, because it's your enemies or arch rivals, Hibs. They are playing against Rangers, and this is the live Sky game.
It's very strange because it's Rangers against Hibs at Tynecastle, which sounds very strange. But no, I mean, it's the SWPL final, so it should be a decent game. And the fact that it's live on Sky, it is brilliant to see. Hopefully, a lot of folk will tune in. Hopefully, Tynecastle will be full. Well, not too full because it's a Hearts ground. But no, hopefully, it'll be full. And I think it'll be a decent game. Rangers, you would have to say, are going to be massive favourites. They've got a decent record against Hibs. I think the last time they played them, they won 1-0 in October. So it should be a Rangers victory, but listen, it's cup final football. You never know. Hibs could easily get a victory, but it's just great to see the women's game getting this kind of highlighted live on Sky. The first time watching a cup final live on Sky, it'll be great. So hopefully it'll be a decent game. Hopefully it'll be well attended, and hopefully a lot of folk will watch it, because I don't think there's anything else on that day. So I'm assuming they will.
Talking about women's football, there's a game on tonight, Graham, and I don't know if that's been televised or not. Motherwell against Packet Thistle in the Scottish Women's Premiership. That is an 8 o'clock kickoff as well. But yeah, I mean, I think we were talking about this the last time that I was on the show, that Sky Sports, it's good how they're covered in it, that the women's football. But am I right in saying that they're only going to cover about 4 games? And that must be a bit disappointing, Graham.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, they do show a little women's game on that BBC Alba. I actually watched the Hibs Hearts game last week that was on Alba. Decent game, 1-1 draw. And obviously Hibs won the Capital Cup on penalties, but it was a decent game. I think it was like over 8,000, which is the most crowd in a women's game, which is fantastic again to see. So it just highlights the women's game a lot more, and hopefully Sunday will be exactly the same. It'll be very similar. But yeah, the fact they're only going to show 4 games is disappointing, I think.
So I can't find the website I was looking at last night, Graham. That's terrible. I should get bookmarked it. But I was happy to see that Sky Sports have an all-women panel on it. Except the Scotland women's manager, his name is away out as well.
Pedro Martinez Losa.
Well done. Yeah. And also they will have Eddie Barber presenting, and they will have a current Scottish football player, a female current Scottish football player in the studio, and I can't remember her name either. Wow, I'm doing well here. And there's going to be your pal Graham, Ian Crocker, is going to be the commentator, and again a female summarising on. So it's good to see that the game is taking place, but also people involved in the programme has actually got a kind of knowledge of the game as well.
Yeah, but I haven't actually seen what time it's on at, but I just hope it gets. I just hope it gets the big build up. You know, a lot of cup finals, like not just women's game, but men's games as well. They kind of tend to start an hour earlier, so you get a big build-up. Hopefully this will be the same, so you get a decent build-up. But it is great to see that the women's game is getting talked up a lot, and the fact that it's going to be a lot of women pundits as well that know what they're talking about is great. As I said, just so it gets the big build-up it deserves.
Yeah, now that you say that, Graham, I'm desperately trying to find the kickoff time on there. But hopefully people will tune in, and you never know, there could be young girls watching the football that wants to take up the game.
Yeah, definitely.
I've actually just saw it, Graham, at 12:30 on Sunday at Tynecastle. I've got no idea when it comes on the old TV box, but I would imagine it would be 12 o'clock for a 12:30 kickoff.
I'm going to have a little look and see if I can find out.
So that's good for the game. We'll probably just jump back to the men's game, Graham, because there is
You're right, 12 o'clock it's on.
12 o'clock, yeah. Cool. At least could get something right. First time for everything, aren't there? Just got to jump back to the games because of my pal and colleague Graham. Graham, you're here. Dave is not here tonight because he is away to a blow-off confirming game in the Challenge Cup, the quarterfinals, and the two good games, but I don't think none of them's on the telly, actually. Arrow are playing Queen of the South tonight as well.
Yeah, I don't think that. I'm just going to double check because normally these kind of games are on Arrow, but I don't think they are.
And while Graham's checking for that, I will run through all the rest of the games in the Scottish Challenge Cup quarterfinals tomorrow. Elgin City against Clyde, Hamilton against Inverness, Kirtley Hearts is playing Lithgow. Queen's Park is at home. I don't know if Queen's Park's moved yet from Hampden, Graham. I don't think they'll be moving until the new year. They're playing against Montrose and Rayforth against Morton. And if you're interested, there's two games on in League Two tomorrow. East 5 against Bonnie Rig Rose. Skinnersmuir against Forfar tomorrow. So that's your pick of the games. And also there's league games, there's Highland games on as well. Lower league games on as well, but we're only on till 7 o'clock. So I might not get them fitted in.
Yeah, the games, there's no games on TV, I've just checked.
No games on. That's a wee bit disappointing as well. Because am I right in saying that cup competition, they invite teams from Wales and all that to take part in it?
Yeah, well, Linfield are in it, aren't they? Because they play, is it Kirtley Hearts tomorrow? They're from Ireland, so they're in it.
Yeah.
I think they do that all the time, and I'm sure, I don't know if they won it, but I'm sure there was a final maybe last year, the year before, where Connors Quay were in it potentially.
I think that kind of rung the bell. One of them was in the final, but they didn't win it, Graham.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It does sound really strange, the fact that it's a Scottish Challenge Cup where you've got teams from Wales and Ireland in it. But
yeah, but it's Scottish football after all, Graham. They do things a bit back to front here.
Well, why not? Just to fit everyone in.
But let's just to whet your appetite, Graham. The football back on Thursday night. Let's just have a wee quick look at this. 8 o'clock kickoff for Rangers against Hibs. And we've got games on Saturday. The big game at Piccogley, Aberdeen, Celtic 12:30. Hearts against Kilmarnock. Livingston against Dundee United. Murrow against Midden. And Ross County against St Johnstone. Now, I don't know about you, Graham, right? But because the football's not been on for ages, I need to actually look at the league table again because it's been a while.
I know it just feels so bizarre, the fact that you're coming back, the World Cup the World Cup finals next week, but you've got games on the Saturday. It is very strange, but I do know that Celtic are top. I know that Hearts are somewhere in about 4th or 5th. So yeah, I mean, it is a very bizarre time, and we're used to like the run up to Christmas having like games. Even there's games on Christmas Eve. I don't think that's happened before either.
No,
so
I think they'll have 12 of them actually.
Yeah, it's just very strange that I'm normally doing my last minute Christmas shopping on Christmas Eve, and I can't do that now because there's games on. Sorry, missus. But no, it is just very bizarre that we're having games on Christmas Eve, and I mean, I'm sitting here in my little room, absolutely freezing cold, and there's a World Cup on. It's wrong. It's just wrong. But no, I can't wait to have the football back though. Just kind of wait.
But do you know the only thing that came out of the World Cup that's positive is there's no winter break this year.
I know, but then the thing is, you're going to come back. There'll be no winter break, but there'll be games called off because of the snow. You know that's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was thinking about it up there, Glenn, and you just, you've just come in and you've just scattered it everywhere. So yeah,
I've made a 2-footed challenge right in there.
Yeah. I wasn't a handball by Michael Smith. It was a 2-footed challenge that time.
Oh, not that again. I was weeks ago. Get over it.
I know. That was the only game I can remember. That was October. So yeah, I mean, going back to your favourite subject, Graham, I know you love to speak about this on the show of the week, not VR. I mean, when I saw that news yesterday coming out, I thought, well, it could go on the happen in Scottish football. And then I put on Twitter, it's totally embarrassing.
It is. I mean, you've got to have either all the Scottish Cup games with VAR or all of them not with VAR. But I said this to Dave last week as well, that last week Ian Maxwell came out with a statement that he thinks VAR is working. Well, it's clearly not, because every week there's a controversial decision, and mainly about the handball rule. No one seems to know what it is. Certain referees seem to be given handballs, other referees aren't given handballs. You've got some referees going to the monitor, some referees not going to the monitor. I don't know how we can say that it's working when every week I'm saying I hate VR. But again, it's not VR though. That's the technology. It's the folk in these rooms that are using it. That's the issue. But I think the fact that you've got these Scottish Cup games, and again, it's unfair that Darvel could get done out of a decision because they've not got VAR. I just think it's an absolute shambles. But as you said, it's Scottish football. It's no surprise.
There's no replays, isn't there, no, Graham? Because that's better as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably better there's no replays. Although, to be honest, given the fact that Hearts are playing Hibs, I don't know how I feel about that, if I want a replay or not.
And I was just looking today that our pal, before we come on, I was looking at what else that's been happening because, Michael's right, it is still a bit quiet in Scottish football. But Ryan Poitier, I know Rangers are looking at him, but at least 6 English Championship clubs are looking at him as well. I don't know if you heard that, Graham. The West Brom, Watford, Norwich, Stoke City, Sunderland, and Millwall.
All the rubbish clubs in the Championship, then that's not a surprise. Sorry, Ryan Poitier. But no, I mean, I don't know how to put this, but I do think that at times Ryan Poitier, and I've said this before, I think Ryan Poitier is very overrated. The last Scotland game he played, don't get me wrong, he was very good. But I do think at times he is a bit too rash. He makes some really poor decisions. I'm maybe a little bit surprised that he is potentially leaving Hibs. I thought he would have been there for a while longer. Is he a player that Rangers would be after? Given what I've heard so far from Rangers fans, I don't think he is. But I think as well that, I don't know who it might be, Michael Beale, I don't know, but I think he's talked about the fact he wants to have like Scottish players in the Rangers team. Ryan Poitier, again, with John Stewart playing alongside him, would that work? Potentially. But I think if Ryan Poitier is going to leave, it probably is going to be when a Championship club that goes to our League One club in England. He's not giving the Premiership because he's nowhere near good enough for that level. But when he leaves Hibs, I don't think he'll be a massive blow, if I'm being honest. I think Hibs can probably get better than Poitier. I don't know who, but I do think they can probably get better than Poitier because I think he is vastly overrated.
Yeah, and also on the news today was you spoke about him earlier on, Graham, the new Celtic right back, Anthony Johnson, who I thought he was 12 looking at him because he's guy young, maybe not shaving yet. He's basically told fans on Instagram, he made a comment about well, I need to say that the day I need to give credit to the Daily Record because they basically come up with the story. But new right back, Anthony Johnson, Cole was talking to fans and they hinted that Victor Wanyama might be coming back as well.
That's a blast for the past. Victor Wanyama, when we see last year? That was years ago.
He's 31 now.
Is he a signing that really Postecoglou we're looking at? I don't think he would be, to be honest.
I don't think he would be into the team, Grim.
I don't think he would either. Gordon McIntosh says Celtic also looking at a Korean striker also. I mean, I think if they're going to lose Juranovic, having that backup there of Alistair Johnson, I think is a good signing. I think it's £4 million they paid for him, I think.
Well, I mean, because they've knocked out Brazil, Grim, you would think his price tag would go up even further now.
I mean, you're a Celtic fan. How much would you be looking to try and sell Juranovic for?
Well, obviously, I was quite high before he went to the World Cup. Now he's went to the World Cup, and that's the played well, believe it or not. And so between 12 million, 12, 13 million, do you think that's decent?
I think that's quite fair. Maybe potentially higher. But again, it depends how far Croatia go. If they get to the semi-finals, that'll just go up even more. Yeah.
So it really depends on what round he gets to the World Cup, and then if he gets to the final, God, you're talking about maybe just under 20 million.
I genuinely think Juranovic has been brilliant at the World Cup. He's been very impressive. Again, I watched him before I came on the show today, and he was excellent. He really was. He's one of these right backs that he's very, very quick, but he's good going forward, and he can defend. He's got everything. So I think he is a potential for me, probably 15 to 20 million pound player. And I think it'd be a massive loss to Celtic. But the fact they've got Alistair Johnson in now, probably to replace him, is a bit of a boost. But I mean, I think Juranovic has been brilliant. I really do. He really has been a fantastic player for Celtic and for Croatia.
I don't know about you, but when I was watching the BBC coverage at half time and they never mentioned Juranovic's name, they just said, he's a good player, the right back. And I'm thinking, well, who is he? But that's how ignorant the English media is in terms of Scottish football. Rangers are looking to tie down forward Robbie Urey, Robbie Urey. By the way, if you're watching, sorry, but I don't even know you.
He's midges, laddie.
Yeah. I wonder if he's a big guy. He's only 18, Graham.
Yeah, I mean, I think he came on against St Mirren. He didn't really do very much, but he's a young laddie. So if that's what they're looking to do, fair enough. Keep the youth in there. But I think Rangers have got more players they need to bring in than obviously tying Robbie Urey down. But as I say, Michael Beale's got a big job on his hands because they're trying to catch up Celtic, and they won't do that this season. And then next season again, he'll be judged more next season, I think, when he's got his first full season. But he's got a lot of work to do because that squad, as Michael rightly said, they need to kind of overhaul that squad. And as I said, if you look at the figures I mentioned earlier, the money they've spent since 2018 is crazy.
I must admit, Graham, I wasn't here last week, but and I didn't watch the show back, but I've got to give you massive credit because it was a brilliant show last week with David Ferguson. And if you haven't saw that show, go back and watch it, but it was a good insight into the late great Doggy Weir.
Yeah, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to David about him and the stories that he had. You know, as I said last week, he comes across as a real character on and off the rugby pitch. He just seems a kind of larger than life character. And it is a sad loss. I mean, the fact that he was having to bite to battle for 6 years, this horrible disease. And, you know, he had a lot of dignity about him, had a lot of, you know, he's obviously got a lot of friends and a really good family as well. But last week was great. You know, the fact that David knows Doddy Weir, you know, the stories he could tell was great. And I thoroughly enjoyed that show last week. And the fact that I tried to give it more airtime. So I tried to get that as much credit as it deserved. And I just thought David was brilliant last week. I really did. And it was great to have like a tribute to Doddy Weir because he deserved it. He really did.
Yeah, and if you haven't, or maybe you want to watch it again, it's still on the Indie Live YouTube channel as well. But it's very good, Graham, because I'm not a big rugby fan. I would watch the Six Nations and all that, but you know, and to be honest, I gain too many rules because the rugby game now as well. It's going to turn on American football, but it was good to listen to David's insight into it, and as you were saying that he knew Doggy quite personally as well, so that makes it a bit kind of unique, you would say.
Yeah, but as I said last week to David and David Smith as well, that the word legend gets flitted about quite a lot for other people, like Lionel Messi's a legend, Ronaldo's a legend, but in terms of Doddy Weir, he genuinely was a legend. He really was. I mean, what he did in his 61 caps for Scotland, he was also the only Scottish player that's ever scored 2 tries against New Zealand. Never been beaten yet, and I don't think it ever will do. So he's just an absolute legend on and off the pitch. And the battle that he had with that motor neuron disease, I mean, you look at Rob Burrows down in England, and you look at what his pal Kevin Sinfield's done, like running that marathons and stuff. It's fantastic, you know, and the money as well that Doddy Weir raised for M&D, I think I said last week, was it around 8 million, maybe more. It's incredible, it really is. And to have that insight from David Ferguson about Doddy Weir, the man and the rugby player, it was brilliant, really fascinating stuff.
I mean, I was very sad to see Doddy Weir at the Scotland game. Was it the last game in the autumn test? I never saw the game, but I only saw it in the news. And yeah, when they came out with his wife and his sons, I was just quite sad to see, and quite kind of you would think, well, he used to play for Scotland, and you know he used to go to Scotland games when he retired and all the rest of it. And it's a shame to think that, you know, like it was basically a good thing he got in his wheelchair and couldn't do anything for himself at the end of it. It was because of a pure shame.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a horrible disease. You know, we are obviously fortunate that we've never had to go through this, but I can't imagine how it must have been for him and his family as well. It must have been horrific. But, you know, he kept battling. You know, 6 years, it's a long, long time. And he kept on battling. And it was, you know, we always knew it was going to happen in the end, but it was still such a tragedy when it did happen. And you know, to see him in that way was horrible. You know, you're watching a guy that you grew up watching in the 90s and stuff, and it was horrible to see. But, you know, the fight with M&D obviously still goes on for a lot of other folk, and it was just horrible. But to hear David and hear his stories and, you know, the close personal bond that he had with him, I thought it was great. I really enjoyed last week's show, and that's why I dedicated so long on it, because I thought it deserved that amount of time.
And I know that I'm not thinking big of a show up here, or anything. Well, maybe I am, but when you hear about people dying and all that, football, rugby, or whatever, and they only speak to them for about 10 minutes, but you went into detail, and I think it was a good half an hour or an hour that you spent, and that was really good. So you actually got the personal touch as well, you know, and you actually spent a lot of time on it, focusing on a big moment for a big giant, you would say, of Scottish sport.
Yeah, I was going to use the word gentle giant, but I don't think on the pitch he was a gentle giant. But no. I I mean, I'm not a journalist. I've got no media background. I do the show because I love doing the show, and I thought last week it was important that I spent a lot of time talking about Dodie Weir. You know, I thought it was really important that I got that out there, and the fact that I had David on for that long as well. He was due to go off after about half an hour, but he ended up staying on because we were just enjoying the chat. So yeah, I thought it was important to get that out there and to get, you know, just what a character Dodie Weir was. I didn't know the guy personally. I wish I did, but I thought it was important to get his story out there and, you know, what he did for Scottish rugby, what he did in terms of raising money for M&D, and just what a fantastic character he was on and off the pitch. So it was getting out. It was great, and I really enjoyed last week, and I've had a lot of good feedback from it as well, which was great to hear as well.
And I do think as well that we could get easily not had David going last week, and you could get spoke to Dave Smith about Doggy Weir, but to me that wouldn't have the same effect.
No, 100% not. You know, we could have spoke for 10-15 minutes about Dodie Weir, and it wouldn't have given him justice. So I think having David Ferguson on, a guy that knew Dodie Weir personally, and having that kind of personal touch and getting to talk about him personally and as a player as well. You know, he was playing for the British Lions as well. You know, and the thing is, again, I mentioned this last week as well. Whenever anyone dies, you always get these people that come on and say, oh, you know, he was a brilliant guy, he was a fantastic character. Dodie Weir generally was all that. You know, you've got like Ian McGeechan, who gave Dodie his British Lions debut, talking about what a great character he was. You've got Gregor Townsend, the Scotland coach, and what a great guy he was. And, you know, it was great to, you know, I wrote all this stuff down last week, so I was prepared for what I was going to say. And it was just great to hear about what a guy he was and what a player he was as well, because you forget as well, he was a very good player as well as being a great person.
Yeah, you know what gets me with even going back to Fernando Rickson and Jimmy Johnson and the likes of, they all have a smile on their face, Graham.
They do.
You know.
Yeah,
but I think you've got to have that attitude.
Yeah, I think you do. It must be, you know, we can't get inside these guys' heads. We don't know what it's like to have that kind of disease and that crippling disease. And the fact that they were able to smile about it and put on a brave face, despite what they were going through, is incredible. And again, football, rugby, whatever, there's a rivalry, Celtic Rangers rivalry, Hearts Hibs rivalry. But when anyone dies like that, it brings fans together, which is great. It's never gonna happen normally. But when these kind of things happen, it brings folk together and say, oh, you know, Walter Smith, what a great manager he was, what a great guy he was. Tommy Burns, what a great guy he was. You know, Rangers fans say the same thing about Celtic people. And it's the same with rugby as well. You know, a lot of people that maybe they're not Scotland fans, they're maybe England fans, but they see Dodie Weir's died and they think, do you know what? He was a great guy. So it brings folk together.
No, it makes kind of like the sporting community, if you want to call it like that, a wee bit smaller.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, these kind of things bring folk together. And I mean, I think David Ferguson actually said this week what it's going to be like when Dodie Weir has his funeral and all these folk will be standing outside that can't get to the church because he was such a legend. You know, it's great. It's great to hear that kind of thing and just what a guy he was.
I think David Ferguson said his funeral's the 18th. So is that like a week on Monday or that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, very sagging. I don't think there'll be a dry eye even in the house. And I think David Ferguson find it a bit difficult at times to speak about Doggy Weir, but he actually did well to hold it together.
Yeah, he did really well. Honestly, David's such a great guy as well. He comes on quite a lot on the show, and for a St Mirren fan, he's all right as our Dave. But I really enjoyed last week. It was great to hear.
Yeah, no, definitely. So that was Doggy Weir kind of like passed away. But before we talk about tonight's small matter of quarter-final in the World Cup, just to let you know, Brazil, fun enough, has been knocked out of the World Cup. It was 1-1 after extra time. Croatia beat Brazil 4-2 in penalty. So that's That's another big boy at the World Cup, Graham.
Well, there goes my prediction for a France-Brazil final. I thought Croatia were very good. So I say Juranovic, fantastic. I thought Brazil they weren't at their best, but Croatia were very good and they deserved to go through. And again, some of the Brazilian penalties were not particularly great. There's been some really poor penalties at this tournament.
Yeah, no, they have. I mean, the Spain penalties were absolutely shocking. In fact, I don't think they even scored one.
No, they didn't. The night before that, Japan put all the effort and scored only one penalty. Their penalties were dreadful as well, but the Spanish ones were awful.
Yeah, no, exactly. So before we talk about the World Cup, let me whet your appetite by talking about the next weekend's football. I mentioned it earlier on, but the football is back next weekend. Hey, I don't know if I've mentioned it already in the show, but it'll just be good to see football back, Graham.
Yeah, it will be for about 5 minutes till your team gets beaten and you think, I wish the World Cup was still on. But no, I cannot wait to see proper football back. No offense to World Cup, but proper football. And do you know what else I can't wait for? We're going to be talking about VAR again, because that's going to happen every week on this show.
Well, at least you're going to have to go to a pantomime this year, Graham.
Oh, yes, I do.
Oh, no, you don't just go to VR, and that's a pantomime in itself.
No, I'm quite excited for the fact that there's games on Christmas Eve. I won't be there because it's in Dundee, but I'm quite excited for games on Christmas Eve. It's been a while since that's happened, so you get a wee Christmas Eve boost of football, and then next day the big man comes down the chimney, and I can't wait till I get my pair. I can't wait till I get slippers.
There was a few things that I could say there, but it's a family show. So I've not had a look at the fixtures game, Graham, but as a games on Boxing Day as well, no?
I actually don't think there is, because I'm sure I checked this and I don't think there is.
Yeah, might be a game after Boxing Day. I'm not sure.
Go my calendar because I usually write these down. So Boxing Day, it's usually just the English Premiership that's got games on Boxing Day. Yeah, there's nothing on Boxing Day.
But yeah, I mean, the good thing about the World Cup being on, there's no winter break this year, but sadly, you won't get that every year.
There's a full fixture list on the 28th of December, and the big game that night is Hibs against Celtic at Easter Road.
Oh, right, okay, that's good. Yeah, that's a big game. Yeah. Okay, we're getting carried away with ourselves, Graham. Let's go back to the small matter of the World Cup. There's a game on tonight. Before we get to that game on tomorrow, Graham, Morocco against Portugal, and
come on, the French!
Yeah, against France tomorrow, and I'll be maybe behind the couch or whatever. But no, I mean I don't. I'll be watching the show back in the week's time saying, Michael got run again. But France has been awful impressive so far. Not been outstanding, but got the jobs done well.
I mean, they've probably got one of the players of the tournament, Mbappe. I think Mbappe's been brilliant this World Cup, and I just hope he has a good game tomorrow. But no, I mean, the France-England game, it should, on paper, be a decent game. I don't really care as long as France win. But I think it should be a decent game. But I say this quite a lot. Sorry, I got hiccups. England as a football team, I don't mind them. It's always been about their media and their pundits and the fact they are so arrogant. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't mind if England did okay. I wouldn't want them to win it because it's a rivalry. But it's always the pundits that annoy me. Because every tournament they go into, they're so confident. And the other thing that annoys me as well is you've got the very first game of the tournament was Qatar against Senegal, I think it was. Within 10 minutes, they were talking about the England game, which wasn't even kicked off. It kicked off the next day or the day after. That's what annoys me.
This is when I know that we keep saying every week we should get VR right in Scottish football, but this is when you want VR to go wrong and against England in that game.
That'll be hilarious. But then they would just talk about it for another 40 years like they did in 1966.
Yeah, I know. Morocco's having a good tournament as well. I mean, nobody was expecting them to be in the quarterfinals. I mean, I was saying earlier on to you, Michael, I mean, if Morocco can qualify for a World Cup, why can't Scotland?
Do you remember when Morocco hammered Scotland in 1998 and it beat us 3-0? That was fun. But Morocco have been decent. I don't think they'll beat Portugal tomorrow, but you never know. I mean, I had to laugh at the fact that it was a couple of days ago, Portugal won 6-1 and Ronaldo was on the bench and he looked gutted at the guy that took his place scoring a hat-trick, which made me laugh. But no, I think Portugal probably will beat Morocco. But again, that's potentially a decent game. But the one tonight, I mean, I don't want to talk about a game because when I do that, normally it ends up being horrible. But I really, really have high hopes for this game tonight. Argentina against Holland could be an absolute cracker, or it could be dull as dishwater. I'm hoping for the first one.
Well, we said that about Brazil and Croatia, and that game was a bit disappointing, Graham.
Yeah, but I mean, I just think Lionel Messi up against like Virgil van Dijk has the potential to be a really good draw there. So this could be a decent game. And part of me would love to see Argentina winning the World Cup just because of Lionel Messi. But then again, I just think France, for me, look probably the strongest team in the tournament. So I don't know who's going to win it. I really don't. But I think Argentina tonight might just beat Holland by the odd goal. And I'm going to go 2-1 Argentina tonight.
Well, not because you're saying that, right? I don't know. Every time I always fancy the Dutch at times. They always bring some colour to the games in terms of the fans as well, but also they're good kind of like football in the nation. So I might go against you, Duffy, on this one. I might go.
I've lost you. I appear to have lost Michael. I don't know what's happened there. I don't know if he's hearing me, if you're hearing me. Earth to Michael. So I'm assuming that I'm still talking here. And if I am, we've got about 13 minutes to go in the show. Thank you again, everyone, for all your comments. It's been great to see all the comments coming in. Oh, Michael's back. Is he? Is he here? Hello, Michael.
Oh, yeah, we're back in the room.
Where did you go?
I never paid the meter this week, Graham. So the money ran out. I think that's because I went against you in the bet, by the way, when I said Collins going to win tonight.
See, there's a glitch in the system here that doesn't let you in when you go against me.
Exactly, yeah. Well, they're not called Collins now, that they're called the Netherlands.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a few Hollands games and I don't think they've been particularly impressive. They've got through, but I don't think they've been great. So, I mean, as I say, I would love to see Argentina win a World Cup just because it's Lionel Messi and this is going to be his last World Cup, let's be honest. And I want to see him winning this. But I just think France, for me, look the strongest team in the tournament. And I really hope I've not jinxed that for tomorrow. Please don't let me jinx that for tomorrow.
No. Or else I'll be over to Pennycook. I'll bring the boys in the bus, and all that. Yeah. So, do you think I know I was talking earlier on about the World Cup. Do you think there won't be any kind of legacy? You know, when we talk about the World Cup being like a legacy, and oh yeah, remember that World Cup because of this, and this, but. Do you think this World Cup will be remembered of just to make money and against human rights?
Probably. I mean, I think as soon as the World Cup's done, I think it'll be forgotten about quite quickly. I certainly will because I've not watched all of the games. But yeah, I think, Michael was talked about earlier on about the fact you talk about the human rights and all that kind of stuff. And it should never have been playing guitar in the first place. And it was about money. We all know that it was about money. The football kind of started to take over a little bit, but still, it still needs a better taste in the mouth that it has been in Qatar and all the stuff that's happened. And for me, it's not been one of the best tournaments football-wise that I've ever seen. And I think it will be remembered mainly for the money side of it.
Do you think that? Yeah, did you hear this as well, Graham, the other night? They were saying on the telly that this football skigum, whatever the skigum was in, I can't remember the game, they're knocking down the skigums as well.
Yeah, I did hear that. What's the point in all that? You've gone to all that trouble, mate. You've gone to all that trouble, all this human rights stuff and that to build these stadiums and then knock them down pretty much straight away. Absolutely pointless. And the money that must have cost as well is crazy. But it's been about money. That's all it's been about.
Now, me and you love football. We love the sport. We obviously, I work as a journalist and all that. 4 games a day, Graham, a bit much.
Yeah, as I say, I've not watched a lot of them, but the games I've watched, they've not been great. But I know a lot of folk, and a few mates as well that have said that they've watched like every game. Now, I love my football, don't get me wrong, but even that for me might be slight overkill. I think my wife, I think if I'd watched all 4 games every day, I would be divorced by now. There's no chance to get away with that. No way.
I was just a bit much, Graham, because you feel as though like when you were getting up in the morning, the game was on, and then when you were going to your bed, the last game was finished.
You were pretty much, so let's say the build-up started at 9. You were pretty much 9 in the morning till say 9 o'clock at night. It's a long day watching football, and if the games are not particularly great, it's even longer.
And the difference is, Graham, if that was played in the summer, you wouldn't have got 4 games a day.
I think I'd have probably watched them more if it had been in the summer. It's just the fact it's winter time and the fact that it's in Qatar, and it's just been an absolute shambles, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, I know they used to do like 3 games a day, which is fine, but 4 games, probably even for me, is slight overkill.
Yeah, no. I was I basically went into my living room I have another room apart from this one, to watch the football because it was actually, don't tell my bosses, but it was actually putting me off my work at times. But yeah, some of the games are a bit boring actually, but I still watched them.
There were so many games that were like 0-0 at half time. I just think this is pointless. I'm switching this off. I'm not watching the rest of that.
I think like what they were saying that this is the first World Cup. It's been there's been a lot of 0-0 games at half time, but in the second half, it's been like 2-1 or 3-1 or our team's always won.
Yeah, that's why I can't wait to get back to proper football next week. Although again, as I say, you've got players just coming back for the World Cup, like Juranovic not yet, but you've got other players coming back for the World Cup that are going straight into another game. It's been a very strange time, and I will be honest, I hope we never have another Winter World Cup because it doesn't feel right.
No, exactly, and I'm glad Michael, even though this is a sports show, Graham, but I'm glad Michael said about like migrants building the stadiums. A lot of them died when they were building the stadiums, but like, if you dug your research, you would be able to find it. But there's not a mention anything about that, and that's actually quite sad. And I don't know if you saw it before the World Cup. There was a thing going out on social media about this guy from say Croatia, TV, and it was doing a kind of P.S.K. camera, and it was actually speaking to. Like, it must have been a news program about the World Cup, and you actually saw this guy coming towards him, and he was dressed in the full like the regalia, and actually stopped and says, "Choose me, ID." So this poor guy, yeah. And I thought that's a bit kind of, and that was before the World Cup, Graham. And I thought, oh no, what we're going to be up against here.
Yeah, it wasn't a great start, was it?
Nope. But I mean, you would take the weather every day of the week.
I know. I mean, I do wish that Scotland had been there. It might have been a bit more interesting if Scotland had been there, but as I say, I don't think football-wise it's been a particularly great tournament. There's been some decent games, don't get me wrong, and there's been some decent players on show, but overall, I've not been overly impressed with the standard of the World Cup, as opposed to recent years where it's been decent ones. So I don't think it's been a great World Cup, and whoever wins it, hopefully France, whoever wins it, you know, they deserve to win it. But I just don't think it's not been very well. It should never have gone to Qatar in the first place, put it that way. And I just think it's been a massive letdown for me.
Apparently, I was reading something that the ex-FIFA president Sepp Blatter said to the now FIFA president, and every time I see him, I just think money. He basically advised him at the time that Qatar's, you shouldn't have the World Cup in Qatar, and yet he's going against him. And I mean, Blatter was involved in football for years, but I mean, I don't want to go into the whole debate. But I mean, when you talk about that, you always, when you talk about that, you've always got to say that football's kind of like corrupt in some kind of way. I can't believe I could say that, but you know,
yeah, it's quite funny when you hear and see pundits talking about all this kind of stuff in Qatar, but they're quite happy to take the money and work there, aren't they?
Yep. No, like David Beckham comes to mind as well. Other people is coming to mind, and you're thinking, well, why do they make the money? And if they are going to take money, why not like donate it to like a food bank or some kind of like charity that really needs it?
I know these folk all have jobs like in the punditry world and all that kind of stuff. But see, if you don't agree with something, then don't do it. If they wanted to make a statement, then don't go.
Yeah. No, well, that's what I thought as well, right? Because I thought, well, weeks ago I was thinking, well, if teams were get against it, don't go to the World Cup. But, I don't know how that would kind of like look to, their fans or... Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's their profession, Graham.
Also, as well, how embarrassing is it? The World Cup was in Qatar and the host nation were the first ones out the tournament. How daft is that as well?
But you could say... At least you were there, and then back to my point earlier on about Scotland.
Sure, but they were all there because they were the host nation, but they were awful. I mean, they're a terrible side. Although, they'll probably end up beating Scotland on a friendly or something. But yeah, I mean, they were awful.
I don't think after the first game, Graham, I was at that, oh no, this is going to be a long 4 weeks because that game wasn't up too much.
No, it was a really, I mean, I wasn't excited about it, but I thought, you know what, I'll watch it to see what the fuss is about. And it was a dreadful game of football. And I thought, oh no.
I don't think they've actually even scored a goal in the World Cup when they win. Or maybe a shot on target. I can't remember one. I must have fell asleep at that point.
No, they were probably the worst host nation I think I've seen at World Cup. They were dreadful. They really were so poor.
And I don't think... I'm not being bad or anything, but I don't think you'll see them back at a World Cup.
I hope not.
But we're ones to talk, aren't we, Graham?
We'll be there next time. I have trust in Stevie Clark and the boys. We'll be there next time.
I heard Saltcoats is putting a big Saltcoats in Millport. Oh no, that's walking football. They do that. Oh, so yeah.
We could spread the games around Scotland. Let's have games at Darvel and Pollock and that. That'd be great. I'm up for that.
Yeah. And a wet soaking Monday night and a wee bit of snow as well.
Qatar against Portugal and Saltcoats. That'll be funny. I'd take that.
Yeah. I've heard Saltcoats a good night out. You get a good fist up down there as well. Wilson, we're coming to the end of the show now. So that's it's all from us for this week. We'll be back next week, Friday and Sunday, and we'll be looking back at the Rangers game the night before on Thursday night. Okay, thanks, Graham. Thanks to Michael Grant as well, and we'll see you soon. Enjoy the rest of the World Cup, and come on, France!
I'm on the fridge.